The Canadian government is working to diversify its trade relationships, and the Arctic might be a key part of doing just that. As more sea ice melts in the north, new and potentially lucrative shipping routes are becoming available. But that's just one potential avenue for monetizing the north. Joining us on what the future could look like is Heather Exner-Pirot. She's a senior fellow and director of energy, natural resources, and the environment at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Welcome to your morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So scientists are projecting that by 2035, parts of the Arctic Ocean will be completely free of ice in the summer months. So how practical then does the idea become of opening up the Arctic for commercial shipping at this point?
Yeah, it's not as easy maybe as people might think. As everyone's, it's cold this week, everyone's digging themselves out. The Arctic sea ice is growing. And so even though it does reduce in the summer, it mostly, expands in the winter and takes some time to melt. So we are getting maybe an average in some ports, some areas of about an extra day a year, but it's very unpredictable. It's very uneven. So part of it is, go ahead, sorry.
No, finish what you were going to say.
Yeah, I was just going to say that in some areas, actually, the shipping season is getting shorter. And that's because we saw a lot of the older sea ice melt with climate change. Certainly that's happened. But then a lot of the younger sea ice that's just growing from year to year is often more unpredictable, a bit more bergy, sets up in choke points. So it really depends where you're talking about the viability of Arctic shipping.
Listen, we know that people in Canada aren't the only ones looking north. We know that Donald Trump has also talked about our resources that are valuable and rich up there. So in addition to shipping routes, there's also talk of laying undersea cables across the Arctic region. What are they used for? How easily can that be done? And what more can you tell us about them?
Yeah, it's not that easy either, but it does have a compelling case that, we do need redundancy in our connections with Europe, with Asia, and just in general. And the Arctic, the beauty of that sea route is that it isn't heavily trafficked, that it isn't easy for ships maybe to anchor and knock things out. And it is a shorter route in many cases if you're talking about the Northern Hemisphere. So there's a compelling case to add that redundancy. The other thing is, it's hard to operate in that region. And that means if you're thinking security issues with Russia in the Baltic Sea, for example, China in the Baltic Sea. If anyone's cutting cables in the Arctic, you know who it is. So it's a little bit trickier to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we don't have a map to show you, but if we can visualize, you've got Greenland up here, you've got the north here, and then there's this mostly cold and frozen passageway potentially that could go in the north. The federal government has indicated, look, they are trying to diversify their trade relations. Our number one is giving us problems. We're looking at our other options. What allies, other than the U.S., could Canada pursue for closer ties if we have this route in the Arctic?
Yeah, well, I mean, for sure, we're talking about Europe is a big part of it. So, obviously Greenland, we're neighbors, literally neighbors with Greenland on Hans Island, share a border with them. And it takes you into the North Atlantic and the Nordic countries who we have very similar values to. But on the other side, you do have also Japan, South Korea, and then the rest of the Asian market. And so in some cases, we talk about, it saves costs from being a shorter route, adds redundancy that maybe you're not using a choke point, for example, the Malacca Strait or the Panama Canal. So those are the things that we look at. But in my opinion, we're still looking really at medium-term, long-term kind of dynamics.
Senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, Heather Exner-Pirot. Thanks for joining us this morning. Great to have your insights.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.